Right now, a Caucasus invasion. The Kremlin attacks Azerbaijan. No one saw this coming. It looks like it's begun. Breakdown of negotiations in Alaska. At this very moment, the US is moving its bombers to the Russian border. A second front and new NATO bases. Putin cannot accept defeat. The Ukrainian armed forces have powerfully struck military targets in the swamps. The Russians have never suffered such a defeat before. Disaster in Russia's rear. Everything is on fire. A powerful airstrike. Ukrainian drones are destroying Russia's strategic military facilities. The Kremlin is shaking. Putin's secret protection, Trump's diplomatic maneuvers, and a Chinese ultimatum. The world is on the brink. Shock, Putin is losing both the front and his mind. Appetites are growing, but there are zero successes. Russian troops in Belarus. Exercises or a prelude to a new invasion. Urgent, Putin has unveiled new weapons. The Kremlin's hybrid monster is already in the sky. All this and more in our program, Hotspot. The world is in shock. Putin threatens Azerbaijan with invasion. New NATO bases are frightening Moscow. Azerbaijan and its allies have driven Russia into a corner. The Kremlin is shouting about war. Is this really Special Military Operation 2.0? Z-patriots are in hysterics and demanding blood. What a twist! Baku is arming Ukraine. Putin is on the edge. Explosive details coming up right now.
The special military operation has no borders and can take place anywhere, even in the Caspian Sea. Kremlin propagandists have started warning Azerbaijan. Solovyov, Gurulev, and others are threatening to squeeze Azerbaijani entrepreneurs in Russia and possibly even launch a so-called special military operation like in Ukraine.
And soon the Caspian Sea might find itself in a situation where even NATO bases could appear there. And this is so dangerous that, from a geopolitical perspective, it could lead to consequences such that this might not be the last special military operation of our generation.
If we also squeeze the local guys here, who, as we know, are involved in certain kinds of business, then things will change dramatically. I don't quite understand about something stronger. Maybe it can be done differently. The term special military operation is a flexible one, flexible to the extent of the Russian Federation.
The reason for such hysteria is the agreements reached between Ilham Aliyev and Nikol Pashinyan. Azerbaijan and Armenia have renounced territorial claims against each other and signed a peace agreement in Washington. The parties, in their relations, refrain from the use of force or the threat of its use against territorial integrity or political independence, or in any other way.
Undoubtedly, this already marks a break in relations with the Kremlin, and the aforementioned document from November 9, 2020, the trilateral one, where Putin acted as a mediator, is in fact now history. In any case, that's how it is perceived in the South Caucasus, in Azerbaijan, and in Armenia. Absolutely. 5 years later today, the geopolitical situation has changed. Today, the United States is acting as a mediator, and the entire configuration, the geopolitical configuration in the South Caucasus is changing.
Russia does not agree with this turn of events, and a new round of tensions with the Russian Federation is expected in the South Caucasus. On the night of August 6th, Russian drones attacked the Orlovka gas complex station in the Odessa region, through which Azerbaijani gas is supplied to Ukraine. 2 days later, on August 8th, Russian drones attacked the Sakar oil depot in the Odessa region, injuring 4 company employees. The next day, Ilham Aliyev spoke with Volodymyr Zelensky and accused Russia of Putin's strikes on Azerbaijani facilities in Ukraine. During the phone conversation, the parties condemned Russia's targeted airstrikes on the oil depot owned by the Azerbaijani company Sakar and other facilities of our country on Ukrainian territory, as well as on the gas transmission station transporting Azerbaijani gas to Ukraine. They also emphasized their confidence that this would in no way lead to a suspension of cooperation in the energy sector between Azerbaijan and Ukraine. Press service of the President of Azerbaijan. Aliyev also ordered $2 million to be allocated for humanitarian aid to Ukraine. All of this is part of the confrontation that is currently unfolding between Russia and Azerbaijan, which began precisely with that plane crash and continues to this day. And then there was the recent summit in Washington. In other words, a geopolitical confrontation is underway. There has been a deterioration in relations, and now it doesn't even matter what caused it or how things are there now, including the strikes on the airbase. Oh, sorry, I mean the oil depot. It's just a part of it. Azerbaijani media, citing government sources, report that if Russia continues its aggressive policy towards Azerbaijan's interests, then official Baku will begin to consider lifting the embargo on supplying weapons to Ukraine that are in its arsenal. Although Russian military correspondents claim that Azerbaijan has long since made the decision to supply weapons to Ukraine.
Given that, according to a number of sources, Baku is already ramping up production of 122mm and 155mm artillery shells for subsequent shipment to Ukraine, the decision has been made in any case. The only question is how this will be carried out, openly and directly, or through a chain of intermediaries and front companies.
There have already been multiple issues in interstate relations between Russia and Azerbaijan. For example, in July 2022, there was information that Azerbaijan was supplying guided aerial bombs, specifically supplying 82mm mortars and other artillery shells. At that time, Azerbaijan said that this supposedly wasn't the Ministry of Defense's business, that it was a private company, as if Azerbaijan was some kind of Germany. In our country, private military companies can engage in arms supplies.
Azerbaijan has openly chosen a new ally, the United States. And Ilham Aliyev is no longer afraid of threats from the Kremlin and is ready for open confrontation. If earlier arms supplies to Ukraine were kept secret, now Azerbaijan plans to openly provide weapons to Ukraine to fight against the Kremlin. And Putin has in fact finally lost his influence in this region.
Urgent. US bombers at the border. Talks in Alaska under the shadow of military threat. Putin is panicking? Shock. A ceasefire is possible, but the Kremlin moth has no intention of surrendering. Apocalypse in 2025. Russia is preparing 80,000 strike drones. The Ukrainian armed forces are responding harshly. Bryansk region is on fire. Military targets are in ruins. The maniacs of war are joining forces. Putin and Kim are plotting a new world chaos. The US has deployed 3 B-1B Lancer supersonic bombers to Norway for joint exercises with European allies.
Trump is demonstrating the seriousness of his intentions regarding ending the war in Ukraine. I would like to note that prior to this, the United States relocated its nuclear arsenal to the territory of the United Kingdom, and according to Trump, the nuclear submarine fleet was sent to the shores of the Russian Federation.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reported that during a recent video conference with US President Donald Trump, Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and a number of European leaders, Witkoff signaled a possible willingness on Russia's part to agree to a ceasefire.
On the eve of the meeting between the Russian dictator and the American president, the Russian side voiced a new proposal from the occupying country regarding the possible withdrawal of Russian troops from the territories of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions. All of this is happening under pressure from the United States, primarily economic pressure. This includes the blocking of the Shadow Fleet at the moment when Panama and the Bahamas refuse to provide their flags to the Shadow Fleet of the Russian Federation. It also includes the increase in oil production, which against this backdrop has led to a $2 drop in the price per barrel. And accordingly, this is also the truly unprecedented and immense pressure from the United States during the so-called and indeed very significant arms race.
While telling fairy tales about peace, Putin calls Kim Jong-un before meeting with Trump to reaffirm his alliance in the war against Ukraine.
In this way, Putin is trying to make diplomatic gestures, suggesting that the Russian Federation supposedly has military political allies, and accordingly, that decisions regarding the nature of the war and, moreover, its cessation will be made collectively. This is nothing more than an attempt by the Russian Federation to put on a brave face in a losing game.
Russia plans to produce nearly 80,000 strike drones in 2025. This was stated by Deputy Head of the Main Intelligence Directorate, Vadim Skibitsky. We're talking about Goran 2 Harpy 1 drones and decoys like Gerbera. According to Skibitsky, Ukraine's task is to disrupt these plans and destroy the production facilities.
At the moment, according to the Main Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the daily production of drones on the territory of the Russian Federation is about 192 to 200 units. Accordingly, the statement about producing 80,000 drones per year, I emphasize, means an increase in the production of Geran 2 and Geran 3 type UAVs by 20 units per day, bringing the total to about 220 per day. And it should be noted that, taking into account the increased production of UAVs, the monthly capabilities of the Russian occupation army amount to 6,600. At the moment, the Russians have launched about 6,300 drones over Ukrainian territory in the month of July. So, on the contrary, this is evidence of stagnation in the Russian military-industrial complex.
While the Russians are making plans, the Ukrainians are striking at Russia's military facilities. On Thursday, August 7th, the main intelligence directorate announced the destruction of several Russian radar systems in Crimea. One of the targets hit was the latest development of the Russian military-industrial complex, the Yenisei, which currently exists in only a few units. It was restless in Bryansk on the night of August 13th. After a drone attack, the LPDS Unicha oil pumping station in the village of Vysokoye caught fire there. It is noted that this is the largest hub of the Druzhba main oil pipeline network. It is also reported that during the night, drones attacked 2 more oil refineries in Russia, the Volgograd oil refinery and a facility in Slavyansk on Kuban, Krasnodar Krai. Analysts report that Russian troops have entered the villages of Kusheria Viyar and Zolotoy Kolodez north of Pokrovsk. This breakthrough allegedly poses a threat of Russian forces advancing toward Dobropillia, Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, which endangers the entire Donetsk region.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine is controlling the situation, as evidenced by the redeployment of Azov units to the Pokrovsk direction, and accordingly the implementation of counter-sabotage measures to eliminate enemy reconnaissance and sabotage groups that have broken through into the operational rear of Ukraine's defense forces. Moreover, I would like to point out that the information from Western media, particularly from the so-called military correspondent Yulian Repka, about an advance 18 kilometers deep into Ukrainian territory is outright disinformation. This is easy to verify. Accordingly, I am measuring the distance from the line of contact directly to the administrative border with Dnipropetrovsk region.
The Ukrainian Defense Forces have cleared the outskirts of Stepnohursk in the Zaporizhzhia region of enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups. The enemy tried to infiltrate and concentrate in the urban area in small groups, but was detected in time and mercilessly destroyed, according to Ukrainian defenders.
Fires, destruction, chaos. Ukrainian drones are smashing Russian industry. Factories are on fire, operations have been halted. Hundreds of Russian enterprises are under attack. The Russian military-industrial complex is being torn to pieces. Russia is in shock. Ukrainian drone attacks are striking at the rear and the energy sector. All the fiery details, watch right now.
What is that? What is it?
It's nothing serious.
Are they flying? Where? Where are they flying to?
Fires at factories and closed airports. That's how August began in Russia. Intensity and effectiveness. Every day, Ukrainian forces strike Russian military targets or defense industry enterprises and report successful attacks on unique defense factories in Russia. These attacks have exposed problems in the Russian Federation's defense industry and caused panic among Russians. It's blowing up here, man! Bless you. What should we do? Oh my god, well that's get out of here. Thanks to the Ukrainian Defense Forces, the only Russian plant producing helium for rockets in Orenburg was hit. Local residents reported a series of explosions. The M5 highway was closed off. The Orenburg helium plant processes up to 15 billion cubic meters of gas per year and produces helium, which is critically important for rocket engineering, as well as the space and aviation industries. Helium plays a key role in rocket launches. This plant is an important facility for the Russian defense industry directly involved in the aggression against Ukraine. In Yaroslavl, a major fire mysteriously broke out in the building of a paint and coatings company that produces materials for Russia's military-industrial complex. Another strategically important enterprise was attacked in Tatarstan. The distance from the state border with Ukraine is more than 1,000 kilometers. UAVs reached the workshops in Yelabuga. Here, on the territory of Alabuga, is the headquarters of the company that manufactures combat drones. In 2024, the plant significantly expanded the production of Iranian-designed strike and reconnaissance drones, using Chinese components and recruiting Russian teenagers for work. The defense forces gave Stavropol's Monocrystal an explosive night. Monocrystal specializes in the chemical industry, producing synthetic sapphire for optoelectronics, which is used in military equipment.
It's going. They hit it. Yes, they hit it. They hit the oil depot. Here's our highly capable and robust air defense system. Russia. That's it. Fundamentally.
Monocrystal also produces silicon carbide, which is used in armor protection, radars, and military electronics. Monocrystal fulfills state defense orders for the Russian Federation. Eyewitnesses recorded smoke on the factory grounds. Official authorities confirmed the drone threat but did not provide information about damage to the plant.
It's flying. It's flying. It's firing right now at this very moment.
In the city of Arzamas, Ukrainian drones successfully attacked the significant instrument-making plant, causing considerable damage.
One of the leading enterprises of the country's defense industrial complex with a 60-year history. The plant produces equipment for the aviation, missile, and space industries.
The Arzamas plant produces gyroscopic instruments, control systems, onboard computers, as well as key components for the Kh-32 and Kh-101 cruise missiles. In 2020, the plant was awarded the National Golden Idea Prize in the field of military technical cooperation. The plant is under sanctions from the US and the European Union. Before the successful attack, a note appeared on the Visota resource, which is dedicated to news about the military-industrial complex, stating that the plant had acquired new equipment. Now, the press service of the Arzamas instrument building plant is sending out letters in public forums demanding that no one write about the attack, even threatening consequences. Russian defense industry enterprises working for the war against Ukraine are absolutely legitimate military targets. Successful attacks by Ukrainian forces help to reduce the military capabilities of the aggressor country's army. The work to demilitarize facilities that produce weapons for terrorizing peaceful Ukrainian cities continues and is becoming increasingly intense.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Shock! The US president is sweeping aside all Russia experts ahead of the meeting in Alaska, while all Putin wants is a photo with Trump. Meanwhile, China has become more active and also wants to join the negotiations. Zelensky is preparing his own moves. The bunker dweller is under heightened protection. What do you think? Where is all of Russia's air defense? A military-political drama at the highest level.
A week ago, the upcoming meeting between Trump and Putin was being called crucial for ending the war. But today, the White House press secretary is at a promotional event with listening exercises for Trump.
I think this is a kind of listening exercise for the president. Only one party involved in this war will be present, and the president will have to go and once again gain a clearer understanding of how to end this war.
The president of Ukraine also described the upcoming meeting in reserved terms. Leaders can talk about their own interests, but not about the fate of Ukraine.
The conversation between the president of the United States and Putin may be important for the development of their bilateral track. But anyway, they can't decide anything about Ukraine without us. I really hope that the president of the United States understands and realizes this.
For several days now, the press has been spreading news about an alleged exchange of territories and the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the Donetsk region. President Zelensky categorically denied these rumors.
We will not leave. We cannot do that. If today we withdraw from Donbass, from our fortifications, from our positions, from the heights we control, we will clearly open up a foothold for the Russians to prepare an offensive. In a few years, Putin will have a clear path not only to the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions, but also to Kharkiv and beyond. And that is why, in my view, any question of territory cannot be separated from security guarantees.
Meanwhile, the White House reminded everyone that Putin literally begged for a meeting with Trump, and Trump condescendingly agreed to hear him out.
This meeting will take place because the president of Russia requested a meeting with the US president through his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who, as you know, traveled to Russia to meet with Putin at his request. And that is why President Trump agreed to this meeting at Putin's request. The purpose of this meeting is to understand how best to bring an end to the war.
The Russian Ministry of Defense has preemptively accused Ukraine of preparing provocations to disrupt the negotiations. Allegedly, a strike is being prepared on a densely populated area and the killing of dozens of Ukrainian civilians.
Whenever the Russian Federation planned any actions, it would talk about provocations. It has always been this way. But then they would do exactly what they had described as a provocation, as if it were a provocation. In reality, it was them doing it. They will try to blame Ukraine if something goes wrong in the negotiation process.
The United States also clearly fears something. Before the meeting in Alaska, Trump moved bombers to Norway, as close as possible to the Russian border.
Here are 2 submarines. At least it looked like strengthening the negotiating position before Putin. Absolutely. Just like the deployment of nuclear weapons in Britain, yes. But this kind of nuclear escalation of rhetoric from both sides is supposed to bring them to some sort of balance at its peak. As for those 3 planes, honestly, to the Netherlands, I don't know.
The meeting between Putin and Trump will have to be held at a military base in Anchorage because it's the height of the tourist season in Alaska. Although the White House had hoped to avoid publicly receiving the Russian dictator at a classified facility.
Many locations were discussed, but of course, Alaska is a state within the United States. So the president is very flattered and looks forward to the opportunity to welcome President Putin on American soil.
And when Putin comes and humiliates himself on what used to be Russian territory, fully aware that this is and will remain US territory, well, of course, that's a politically charged story for Putin, and quite a tainted one at that. Does it affect the security of the United States that there will be Russians there, their delegations, FSB agents, and all the rest? I don't think so. Why? Because any, let's say, intelligence-sensitive equipment or samples that could pose a risk, I think, will be removed from that base in advance. That's not a problem.
Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán saw an opportunity to promote himself at the upcoming meeting and started talking about things no one had asked him about.
We're talking now as if this is a military situation with an open ending. But that's not the case. The Ukrainians have lost the war. Russia has won this war. The only question is when and under what circumstances the Western countries backing Ukraine will acknowledge that this has happened and what follows from that.
Because this is part of his political propaganda, which is currently relevant to his own political process. He could lose power right now. And if he loses power, he also loses essentially his own physical safety. Yes, the central line is anti-Ukrainian and anti-European rhetoric.
Orbán tried to humiliate not only Ukraine, but also his European colleagues. It's unclear what result he's aiming for, but it's obvious that such statements only make things worse for Hungary itself.
The Russian-Ukrainian war is a European issue, and you Europeans are incapable of solving it. When 2 strong men, the American and Russian presidents, sit down at the negotiating table and you shout from afar afterwards, you look pathetic and weak.
It's not just Europeans who want to dictate the terms of peace. China has also stated that all interested parties should participate in negotiations on Ukraine. It is obvious that under these circumstances, Trump and Putin alone will not be able to make any final decisions.
Urgent. The Ukrainian armed forces are tearing the occupiers to pieces. 2 villages have been liberated. The enemy is in panic. Ukrainian drones are breaking into enemy positions. Russian factories are ablaze. Everything is coming to a halt. Putin is furious. Russian appetites are growing against the backdrop of defeats. And while tensions are rising, Russian women have decided to fend off drone attacks with bells. Intrigued? All the details are coming up in the report.
At around 3 in the morning on August 12, Ukrainian drones struck the monocrystal chemical plant in Stavropol, Russia. Local residents heard 5 explosions, after which a fire broke out at the facility. City authorities claim that the UAVs were suppressed by electronic warfare and the attack was repelled. However, the thick plumes of smoke tell a completely different story. The chemical plant is a key producer of synthetic crystals, which are used, among other things, in the manufacture of weapons for the occupying army. A paint and varnish factory caught fire overnight in Yaroslavl, Russia. The fire engulfed 4,500 square meters, causing the building's roof to collapse. The fire was assigned an elevated 3rd level of difficulty. The facility produces paint and varnish materials, including special coatings for military equipment. Bloomberg reports on successful strikes against Russia's strategic facilities, as a result of which they cease operations. Thus, the Russian oil refinery in Saratov, owned by Powers Nefty, stopped receiving oil after a drone attack on Sunday, August 10th. Meanwhile, the situation on the front lines of the Russian-Ukrainian war remains dynamic. The Deep State Analytical Center reports that in recent days, Russian forces have intensified their advance toward Dobropillia, in particular attempting to gain a foothold near the Dobropillia-Kramatorsk highway.
As of today, our valued European partners and the United States of America have successfully made a very good and substantial delivery to us this current month of critically important long-range artillery, highly precise munitions, and powerful long-range missiles. Therefore, we are holding steady, maintaining a robust and active defense.
On the opposite side of the front, the Ukrainian armed forces are advancing. The Ukrainians have liberated 2 villages in the Sumy region, Stepneye and Novokostiantynivka.
Direction, Kursk region. In this direction, our group's small tactical units conducted effective reconnaissance in force, captured some enemy strongpoints, including fortified and support positions, took a small number of prisoners, and are now holding that line of positions. They have also, so to speak, pushed forward, broken into the enemy's defensive line, and advanced our own line of defense a bit.
It seems that the fewer successes Putin has at the front, the greater his ambitions become. The first Russian units have arrived in Belarus to take part in joint exercises, the active phase of which is scheduled for September. We're talking about several hundred Russian servicemen and a couple dozen pieces of equipment.
They are now going to strategically redeploy their forces, conduct extensive and large-scale military exercises involving significant incursions into the sovereign territory of the former Baltic states, leading to their potential capture and subsequent consolidation, and thereby drawing the entirety of Europe into, let's say, complex and protracted negotiations about definitively withdrawing all support for Ukraine. And accordingly, I truly think that Vladimir Putin will inevitably put forward some very significant ultimatums regarding the precise placement of NATO military bases, particularly those in close proximity to Russia's borders.
Meanwhile, as Putin Napoleonovich conquers more and more territories in his mind, Russian women have decided to fend off drones with bells, foil, and cardboard. They called this innovation Trench 25. See Dobropillia. It's a simple device designed to create a directed sound and emission capable of interfering with the operation of unmanned aerial vehicles. Russia was inspired to create this miracle by the Russian church, or more precisely, its leaders, who claim that the sound of church bells is better than drones.
Shocking. The Kremlin's mysterious weapon. They've copied everything they could, from the Ukrainian Peklo to the American Storm Shadow. Russia has released a new hybrid of deadly weaponry, and China helped out with the engine. What makes Putin's Peklo so dangerous? Find out more in the following report.
Russia now has a new cruise missile. It's the first of its kind for the occupying army. It has already been used against Ukrainian territory.
A single cruise missile, a jet-powered drone, a parcel headed toward Mykolaiv from the south.
These reports appeared on the morning of August 7th, but it wasn't actually a parcel. By the way, it's also a new addition to the occupiers' arsenal. But this was something even newer. Later, images of the downed missile appeared in another Telegram channel.
Almost every country in the world has a cruise missile that can be launched from under the wing of tactical aircraft and strike targets at a range of over 500 kilometers. Russia does not have such a missile. That's why it was important for them to develop such a weapon, and naturally it was bound to appear or has already appeared.
The first thing that caught everyone's eye was that, externally, the new Russian cruise missile looks like a scaled-down version of the British-French Storm Shadow cruise missile.
After we used Storm Shadow missiles on Russian territory, after we used ATACMS, after we used our own cruise missiles, which we used to carry out strikes, whether it's a drone missile or something else. In other words, they had the opportunity to acquire certain technological capabilities. Because again, I'll say that Russia doesn't know how to invent something new, but it does know how to copy or to scale up and modernize existing things. So here, I would say that most likely they received some clarifications on issues where they couldn't make progress. And thanks to that, they created means with which they now want to actively carry out strikes on Ukrainian territory.
The specifications of the new Russian cruise missile are unknown, but it is noted that it is conceptually similar to the Ukrainian Peklo missile. The latter has a range of up to 700 kilometers and can reach speeds of up to 700 kilometers per hour. The warhead of the Peklo weighs more than 50 kilograms.
Taking into account the Chinese jet engine that is used, that's a separate issue, by the way. Russia uses jet engines manufactured in China. So they buy a Chinese engine, install it on this missile, and naturally, with such a payload and such weight and size characteristics, speeds of 500 to 700 kilometers per hour are quite possible.
It is also known that the new cruise missile is launched from a drone. Its launch from the Orion drone has been confirmed. In theory, the missile can be launched from tactical aircraft, but so far, launches from planes have not been recorded. One of the open questions is also at what stage of development the Russian cruise missile currently is.
In fact, if I'm not mistaken, this is possibly the third or fourth use of this missile on Ukrainian territory. So this indicates that they have made some modifications, launched it, checked it, made some progress, refined it, allowed it, and checked it again. Moreover, we understand that they are launching it from the sea, from areas where there are few radar systems that would allow for effective detection of this missile, especially since it uses low altitudes for its flight. In other words, the principle of classical radar does not apply here because classical radar works from 500 meters and above.
So far, only one thing is known. Russia has indeed created its first short or medium-range cruise missile, and the frequency of their launches is only a matter of time. We need to be prepared for this.
That's all for now, and for more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.